So I just think beer brings people together, and it always has. It has since ancient times. It's brought people together. People talk. They enjoy it. It's sort of an open forum where people are tasting things, laughing, enjoying. I mean, you probably get the sense. You've probably been to breweries like that, and so in my heart, that's one of the things that I enjoy most.
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr. I'm filling in for Jeb Blount Sr. And today we have an amazing guest. We have an awesome podcast. I'm so excited. We're going to take a break from sales just for today because we have our ugly Christmas sweaters on. And if you're listening to this, we recorded this in advance, but it's Christmas time. It is the holiday season. Oh, there's a cool vest right there from Kirk. We've got some great things coming up in December. Hopefully you're spending time with your family. Hopefully you're spending time with the people you love. And today we're going to get into a topic that I know a lot of you are probably interested in just because this is so ubiquitous in our culture. And I wanted to talk to a de facto expert because he's the only man who's walked up to me and given me a book about a particular topic that we're going to talk about. I'll hold up a can here. You can take a guess. But before we get going, and if you haven't signed up for any classes on Sales Gravy University, what are you doing? Your team needs this. You need this. It's the most powerful sales training engine in the world. Sales Gravy University has 1,000 hours of on-demand sales training content. We have live sales training that happens every week of every month of every year. And you also get access to reporting. You get access to mastermind groups. You get access to all kinds of great content contributors. So not just the Sales Gravy team, but folks like Victor Antonio and Mike Weinberg and Jeff Bajorek and 45 different contributors to the platform. So it's a collection of the world's best knowledge on sales. If you haven't taken a free course, go to learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com. Use the code FREECOURSE, and we'll see you there. Now, getting into this conversation, before I let you talk, Kirk, we've got Kirk Richardson on. I'm going to monologue a little bit. He came to me at Outbound Conference, which happened in early November of 2024, and he handed me an interesting book, a book that I didn't quite know how we were going to have a conversation on the sales podcast about, so I decided to rearrange everything and do a holiday podcast because the book is called Craft Beer Country, which got my attention because I like craft beer and I like the country. And this is a expose on West Coast beer through the eyes of a journalist and the brewers that he meets throughout a 2,500-mile trek. Kirk, am I getting 2,500 miles right?
No, that sounds about right, Jeb. I was in Hawaii, so just add that in and yeah, definitely at least 2,500 miles.
At least 2,500 miles across the West Coast, interviewing and learning from people who are in the beer industry. Their insights, their stories, their humanity, their troubles, their gaffes, their funs, anything that is happening around beer, Kirk got to witness and see, and he's an expert in this space because of his love and passion for it. He called it a hobby. I think publishing a book and going on a 2,500-mile trek is a little bit more than a hobby, and I appreciate that. So, Kirk, thank you so much for joining the Sales Gravy podcast. How are you doing? How are you doing in Oregon?
Doing fantastic, Jeb. Getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday, and just grateful to be on your show today. Thank you so much for including me. I think I will mention a few things about sales along the way. So those of you who are maybe not as much into beer, maybe more into wine, may talk a little bit about this and that, but there will be a little sprinkling of sales in here. Jeb just doesn't know it.
I love it. Well, and you do an amazing job of also weaving in the stories in this book, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that they like beer or that they're passionate about beer. I mean, they're running businesses, and in a lot of cases, small businesses, which are really interesting microcosms. Like if you look at a small business, you can see all of the things that a big business is doing, but just at a smaller scale. I mean, it's just so, and so hands-on. You get a lot of nuance that you don't get when you're interviewing like a large business, because
True.
there's so much siloing within different departments, and I really love that about the book. But you describe yourself in the book as a journalist, and I did not meet you as, I guess you are a journalist still, but I didn't meet you as a journalist because we were at a sales conference, and I want to understand a little bit more about your background. You have an intro into the book. It's really great about why you love it, why you're passionate about it, but kind of walk me through why beer, why journalism and beer, why understanding stories of people through beer. What's driving that? How did that start?
It's been an interesting journey. I, as you mentioned, started out as a journalist and was writing for newspapers and putting myself through college in San Diego, and ended up in science at General Atomics in the fusion division, ultimately, but working on advanced materials and things like that. But loved journalism along the way, never lost my love for journalism, and wrote scientific type articles, things like that along the way, ultimately ending up at the Materials Technology Institute, which is an international organization, being pulled into marketing for a majority of my career, but always writing on the side. So I had 150 or so food and beverage articles along the way. I started writing for those. Someone had seen an article of mine in a business journal about a dam and the salmon projects in Oregon, where I'm based now, and liked the writing and asked me, would I be interested in writing about food and beverage? And I'm like, cover the phone. Yeah. How much does it pay? And yeah, but I did that for many years, and people were liking the articles and asked me to write a book. I grew up on a avocado ranch in Southern California. My dad was a rancher. And so it was either, what do I write about? Avocados or beer. And it was a pretty easy choice. Although I loved avocados, I selected beer. So I've had kind of that combination of things going on for years, writing by the midnight oil and publishing magazine articles, writing for them on a variety of different topics. I've even written on competitive intelligence for magazines. So it's not strictly food, but that's how I got into beer and started the beer project. I think it was 2015 or 16, and fell madly in love with it and the people along the way. So that's sort of a short version. I talk a lot, so
it's
sales.
It's a podcast and you're a salesperson. Like it's totally fine. So you fell in love with it. Why, 2015, 2016, you've written a lot of articles. You've gotten to a place where people are asking you to write different things, and you fall in love with it. What helped you fall in love with it? What do you think that was? Was it love at first sight? Was it the people? Was it the flavors? Was it the complexity? Was it the markets? What was it that like really drew you in?
It wasn't really the latter, the markets, the things like that. It was the people and their passion for the craft. Many of these folks are scientific and have engineering backgrounds. Many chemical engineers, Jeff Larson up at Alaskan Brewing, I flew up there and met with him in Juneau, Alaska. Was a chemical engineer by training, and he and Marcy started their brewery. He just decided he didn't want to do traditional chemical engineering at a chemical company. And so very technical in nature, but just passionate about it. And And they hung on just barely. I mean, this is a brewery that's doing real well today, noted for its smoked porters and other, dark beers, and everything they produce is great. But at one point, they had to go into the city and sell T-shirts just to make payroll.
Jeez.
So you want to talk about entrepreneurship. And now today, doing very well. You can find their beers just about anywhere. And so the people, and then the beer too. So hey, I guess you could call me a beer snob. I like beers that have amazing flavor, texture, and aromas. My dad on the ranch would drink Coors and Budweiser and Schlitz and things like that. So you had asked me before, when I had my first taste of beer, it was probably was 6 years old, and I didn't like it. In college, we drank Miller, and I still like Miller. Okay, I mean, I'm a beer snob, but I like Miller. Maybe it's because I was weaned on it in college, and it has that sort of sour aftertaste. I do like it, and it's not easy to make a beer like Coors or Budweiser or Miller. There's nothing to hide behind, and I'll get into that later. But it's just not easy. But for me, I like bigger flavor. It's sort of like, hey, maybe you like Taco Bell. It can, something like that might be okay, or a McDonald's on occasion. But you also like to go to the Ruth Chris, okay? And so for me, this is a bit bigger. Maybe the analogy at Thanksgiving of pies is better. Is mom or grandma's home baked apple pie or pumpkin pie or whatever you happen to like, do you think that's going to be better than the store-bought that you run down to the local Publix or whatever it happens to be and pick one up off of the discount rack? Some might suffice, and hey, I mean, maybe it's not bad. You're going to finish it, and maybe there's more money into mom and grandma's pie, and it costs a bit more to make, but is it worth it? So those are my analogies on that. So Jeb, I've gone in a big circle here. I love, and what I looked for in looking at the breweries and what I love about it, what made me passionate about it, fall for it, was the people, damn good beer, and places. Really unique places in many regards. And I can get into that as well. But those three components were big for me.
I want to ask you a question, but first, I know you had, and I know it's early. So if you're listening to this podcast later, Kirk so graciously got up early in the morning, and I'm going to require him to drink alcohol. So, Kirk, what did you? I know, horrible. I'm the worst. But what beer do you have in front of you that you can try while I ask you some questions?
So, see if you guys can see that, but it's AleSmith Speedway Stout, which is I don't know how clear
there it
that
is.
is.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is in my book, and it's also classified as a breakfast stout. So there are others out there that you can find, maybe in your area, all kinds of different breakfast stouts from different breweries, but it's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm usually, by the way, everybody, I'm working hard on my sales at this time of the morning. So this is odd for me to be pouring a beer. I'm going to adjust my screen just a teeny bit here so you can see me pour this. If you learn one thing in the podcast, maybe it's how not to spill a beer. Pour it down the side. And then as it comes up toward the top, right down the center, so we can put a head on it. Okay, you see a nice little head there. I'm shaking because I've had too much coffee and not enough beer. But ideally what we want, that's a a beautiful head, by the way. We want a 1/2 inch to 1 inch head on the beer. And why? People think, I don't want a lot of foam on my beer. I don't, don't make it foamy. Pour it all the way down the side. Oh, you're missing out. That creaminess and the bubbles, those proteins, which is what make up the head, are so luscious. They add to the mouthfeel. They add to the aroma. See, I am a beer nerd.
Well, that's really cool. That's really so. There's always a debate. How do you pour a beer? So I want you to grade how I pour a beer, and then I want you to try yours. So, team in the booth, we're gonna crack a beer. You can crack whatever you want back there, but we have Savannah River Brewing Company. They're a local Augusta brewery, and I went down to their shop. They've got a great thing going on. So if you find their beer, it's great. They've got Augusta themed things. If you're not familiar with Augusta, we have the Augusta National, which of course hosts the Masters, and is also home of James Brown, if you're familiar with James Brown. And I couldn't find anything for a breakfast, but it's brown. It's called the Dynamite Brown Ale. And it's so an ale. I don't know what the difference between a brown ale and a lager and a pilsner and all that is. So you can explain that to me in just a second. We're going to crack this beer open, and hopefully it's not too loud in the microphone. And then you're going to grade my beer in my beer pour. Okay, so you said the ideal is down the side of the glass.
Yes, sir. Yeah, a 45-degree angle if you can get it.
Like so.
And then I'm going to say on this one, about 2/3 of the way up, let's go right down the center. Let's see if the head builds up on that. Hopefully it does. Yeah, look at that. Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful pour.
Yes, and that's perfect.
As always, Kirk, go Dogs. So
I like that.
So a brown ale, and you've got a breakfast stout.
Yes.
What are the differences between those two pours? Like, what do you note in a stout versus an ale? Like, as a non-beer person, well, I drink beer, but I don't know much about beer. What is the difference there?
Oh, generally on a brown, like you have this morning, and a stout, a breakfast stout, that we're talking about the malt in the beer. So both are going to be malt forward beers. Both are going to be, mine's going to be a little more intense in flavor. Mine's going to be from roasted barley, just taken to a different temperature than yours. So it's going to be blackened malt. And mine is going to be maybe I haven't had one of these in a while. This is in my book, by the way, this particular beer. So when I saw it, I was eager to try it again. But mine's going to have some coffee flavors in it, which is appropriate at 8:00 in the morning. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's good. I'm not sure how many sales I'm going to get done this afternoon after this, but it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so I may take a buy. Maybe I'll go down to the pub after this.
Just some coffee and beer and call it a day. And so, what is a malt? And I'm not familiar with the actual malt itself. I know that there people describe there's malt liquor, there's malt candies, but malt beer. What is that? What is a malt?
So in beer we have 4 ingredients. So you think about wines, and I know about wines too. I've written about wines, magazine articles on wines. My wife drags me to wineries. Maybe drag is not quite right. I kind of go along willingly. I do like wine, especially red wine. But beer is a little bit more complex. So we are, and you wine fans, you can argue with me on that, but beer has 4 components in it generally. It has water, which can affect the flavor. Water has minerals in it, hard water. And so you have, it has a bigger effect than you might think. I mean, beer is mostly water. And then you have malt, which is barley in terms of craft beer. Some of the bigger beer producers use rice and corn adjuncts to make their beers. It lowers the cost, and it alters the flavor a bit. Barley is sort of the king of craft beer. Not to say that bigger brewers don't use barley, but barley is the malt. So it's grain. That grain is it goes into a maltery, and they start by soaking it so that it starts to germinate, starts sprouting, and then as it starts to sprout, they take it out and they heat it, the malting process, to bring out the starches and the sugars and things like that. And they take the malt to different temperatures, whether it's a light roast or a dark roast, and that affects the flavor profile. So, like a porter, which is very similar to a stout, they might use a chocolate malt or a black malt to bring out some of those sweeter flavors. Whereas with this one here, the Speedway Stout, they'll take it to the end of the road, really roast it and blacken it and make it more of a sharp coffee flavor. Can have licorice and other types of flavors to it. So your brown there. First of all, how does it taste?
I don't know how to describe it, but it tastes really good. It's smooth. And I that's one thing that I look for in my beer and it's because I have an unsophisticated palate. I drank a lot of IPAs for a while, tried to really enjoy that, but those are typically sharp, very bitter, have a lot of flavor, and like really fill the room. And so I like a beer because I'm a Miller guy myself, college and Miller, sorry parents. And then, I drink because it's easy for me to drink it. And that's really what I look for, like a convenience. I don't like a strong alcohol flavor typically. So lagers are where I stick. Pilsners, I like Pilsners as well. But this is and I don't typically go to the brown end of the spectrum when it comes to beer, but I really like Guinness, although I can only have one Guinness at a time. So I don't go that way. But this is really smooth. I like it. It has a little bit of bitterness in it. I wonder if it's so the brown, is that malt? Like how does that like the different color of the beer? What can you start to pull out? Because I don't want to say I taste these things and it's not in this because of the way that it's made. So what do the different colors mean?
Okay, now I'm going to let you off the hook and say, you can say whatever you want about beer. Beer is personal. And the brewers told me this on this journey as I gained more and more knowledge. They said, Kirk, taste it and tell us. I was on tasting panels too, quality tasting panels at Anderson Valley Brewing in Northern California. Fal Allen put me on his tasting panel. And, I was a little bit nervous about that in expressing, what I saw and felt in the beer. But hey, go for it. Express what you're tasting. The brown beer, the color of it, first of all, is going to be due to the malt. I mean, there are other things you can do to darken or color beer. I mean, we've all seen like green beers and things like that. So you can do that, but it's basically the malt. But what I want you to try is this. I want you to take your beer, take just watch me. And taste it that way. So hold it in your mouth just a second, and then squeeze your nose.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you're taking it, drinking it, let go of your nose and let that aroma go up into your nose.
So
try that.
So hold my nose, take a drink.
Take a drink.
Let
First,
the nose
take
go.
a drink.
Yep.
Take a drink. Nose, drink, and let go at the same time.
So filled with it's like chocolatey, a little bit of coffee flavor, maybe even like some cherry, like some dark, I'm thinking like a cherry covered with chocolate is kind of what the flavors that I get. And
Love
then,
that.
yeah, I think that kind of rounds it out for me because I like that I chose this brown first because you went with a breakfast stout and I went, I can't go for like a Miller Lite. You know, in the early in the morning, something about that doesn't feel right. It's interesting. You've been on tasting panels, and through your book here again. I'm gonna plug it again. Craft Beer Country is the name of this book, and you've got several more in mind that you're gonna hopefully get done quickly. This was a journey through the eyes of different breweries, and we are a business podcast, so sorry, listeners. You listened to some silent air while I tasted beer. I'm not so sorry for you, but the differences between you sat down with Sierra Nevada, right? You sat down
Yeah.
with one of the largest craft breweries in the country. I mean, it's right up there with some companies we have here in Georgia. I'm thinking of festivals that I've been to where Sierra Nevada's been at. I'm thinking of their product line. They're in every store. I mean, Sierra Nevada brews are very, very well consumed in our country, and that's a different scale than the group that was in your book that had to go sell T-shirts, right, to make payroll,
Mhm.
right? Those are very different conversations, but I wonder what similarities you found between the ones that struggle entrepreneurially to make it and the ones who are mature in their journey, who are more retail oriented than craft oriented. It might look like.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Jeb, because Sierra Nevada almost went under as well. It's one of the original craft breweries. Uh, and Ken, I am having a senior moment and not remembering his last name. Maybe one of you guys can look it up on Google real quick. But Ken, I did know him by first name. I came in to his brewery. He was dressed in blue jeans and a checkered shirt. He's a billionaire. Okay. Very casual. I had my son with me. I know you like working with Jeb. I love being with my son too. He was with me. It was very casual. He came in and he kicked back and he talked with me for a while. But he told me during that interview there was a time when he was borrowing from family back when they started, and he was worried. He was worried the brewery was going to go under. And it was a very small operation they used for. I believe they used for their cooling. Their coolers, they used equipment from a chicken farm, a chicken ranch, and they had to clean out the feathers
Oh, no.
to get it going.
Oh,
They
no.
used old dairy equipment. And
Oh.
so this is a billionaire, and this is a big company with breweries. I believe they have one in Carolina, uh, and they still make great beer. They are, they're sort of the flagship brewery. He learned from Fritz Maytag and others. Fritz Maytag, from the Maytag family of washers and dryers, had enough money to buy a brewery, Anchor Steam, in San Francisco, and really is sort of in the U.S. probably could be considered the father of craft beer. So you trace back, the lineage and the roots to him. But nowadays, Ken is still going to the craft beer conferences. They still collaborate with smaller breweries. Yes, it's quite a different brewery. Their location in Northern California has solar panels on it for generating energy. They have a cooler, I think it's a cooler condenser that came from a Navy submarine. It's big time.
They have a what?
Cooler condenser that came from a submarine, and
How do you
it's
even
big.
acquire such a thing? How do you even know how to acquire such a thing? What in the
Yeah,
world?
yeah. When I visited, they had that. So just an amazing place, an amazing guy. That he was very casual and talking to us and very accessible. Again, showing this is a billionaire. How many billionaires do you know out there who you can sit down with and have a casual conversation, who are patient enough The people, the people just make such a big difference in this industry. There seems to be camaraderie. There is competition. Okay. I mean, there are breweries that are going out of business. This is something we kind of foresaw a while back as things really expanded, maybe a saturated market. I think in some states it's undersaturated, so there's room for growth. I think they're down 1%, which isn't too much when you consider there's about 9,000 or so microbreweries, tap houses, and beer pubs in the U.S. Somewhere in the mid 9,000s, maybe 9,700. So they're down a little bit as of 2023. The 2024 figures aren't out, but they collaborate. They work together. They stick together. A lot of them are old friends, and that's part of what I loved about it is all that sort of camaraderie, and you feel that in breweries when you go to breweries, and you feel it somewhat, I think, in wineries, but it can be a little more
stuffy.
Thank you. I appreciate
yeah, I
that.
know you didn't have to say it, but I'm going to say it.
And not always. So I want to be fair to the wineries, and I do enjoy going to them, and I do enjoy wine, as I said. But breweries, it's like, I went to a brewery in Southern California under the I-57 overpass, and I pulled in, and it was an old beat-up office park. And this brewery is called The Brewery, and it's spelled Bruery. Okay, The Brewery. Magnificent beers. But when I walked in, when I pulled up, there were a couple lowriders parked in the parking lot. And when I went in, it was an eclectic mix of people. And all of them were talking. They talked with me. It was just wonderful. So I just think beer brings people together, and it always has. It has since ancient times. It's brought people together. People talk. They enjoy it. It's sort of an open forum where people are tasting things, laughing, enjoying. You probably get the sense. You've probably been to breweries like that, and so in my heart, that's one of the things that I enjoy most. And I may have gotten off topic, but you've hit a button and a passion point for me. So,
question for you: do you feel like the beer industry is a good business to be in, just from your observations? What have you seen?
I would say it depends on location right now. If you're thinking about going into the business, first of all, take it very seriously. The beer comes first. This is not a hobby or something you just get into and throw together and make it work. It's a serious business. It's understanding the chemistry. It's understanding how to market and do sales. You talked about your salesgravy university, all the finer points of sales. So important. But first, you better have a good beer, a good product in a location that is accessible. People can get to you. I saw a brewery in Corvallis, Oregon, near me, that was making really good beer. They won World Beer Cup medals and Great American Beer Festival medals, which is big time. When you get a gold or a silver or a bronze there, you want to talk about a marketing and sales tool. Oh, man. Oh, man.
It's like free marketing.
But they got bumped off what happened is they made their brewery too dependent on outside sales, and they were canning and putting their beers on shelves as well as serving food and beer at their location. That wasn't enough to support their operation. And their cans started getting bumped off the shelves of the markets as the big brewers started buying up craft breweries and started getting a clue and taking back space at the markets. And you see that now. I'm a little disappointed. I go to Whole Foods. I went to Whole Foods last night. I drove 10 miles to pick up a couple of beers that I have here. It was worth it. If I go to Safeway or one of the other markets, the selection just isn't as good anymore. It's really, You know, on the higher end of the craft brew market, as far as production, it's the bigger breweries. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Is it a
those
cost
sorts of
thing
things.
for is it do you feel like it's a cost inhibitor for these large markets, these large businesses to invest in a bunch of different small breweries, whereas they can get kind of just a small selection from a large brewery for pretty cheap and they fill their shelves with
Yep.
that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's also it's where you are in the country, and it's educating uh, your customers. And I think in some of these markets, you know, they know their customers well. They know what they're willing to spend. The craft beers are generally a little bit more. I mean, we're paying uh, up to, well, you can spend up to 20 bucks a six pack, but a lot of times in the $10 range for a nicer beer. Sometimes they're in four packs instead of six. Maybe they're bigger beers, like it's more volume per can.
Right. Yeah, the 16
These
ounces.
two, right? Yeah, so, yeah. But you're paying a bit more. So I think all those factors come into play. But I do think there's room for growth. I would say breweries, from my friends in Oklahoma, breweries are starting to pop up more there. I know in Georgia, what I've heard is it seems like you guys are closing down a brewery every couple of weeks, but I think you have somewhere around 170 in that range of craft breweries. Uh, Oregon, or sorry, California has the most breweries in the country with over 1,000,
Wow.
over 1,000. And I'm not going to say because they have 1,000 they couldn't grow more. I think again, it depends on your demographics. Know this type of stuff. Study it if you're really thinking about getting into it. You could open a successful brewery in California if you make good beer. You have a good location. Maybe put it alongside a river or something where people can enjoy the setting, if that's possible. Make good beer, have good people, and then know sales and marketing and know customer service. Do your homework. So I think that's really important. Georgia, I'm just really not sure what's going on. I know you guys have very restrictive regulations on opening a brewery, and that could be it. I had a friend who opened a very small brewery here in town, and he had to jump through hoops, fiery hoops, backward and forward, and the delays in opening the brewery went on and on and on for over a year. And he ultimately ended up opening it. It's in the book. It's the smallest brewery in my book. He brewed the beer in his garage. He was at the same time the sergeant of the police department in a nearby city, brewing beer. People loved his beer, including some of his fellow officers would come over. I came up. He said, "Do you think I'd open a brewery?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you're making beer just as good as the brewery." So ultimately he did. But that would be a nano brewery. Okay. We're
Yeah.
talking about microbreweries. That's very, very small. So it, again, a long answer to your question is I think there are still opportunities, although there's some consolidation going on, and some well-known breweries have closed down. And I think a lot of times that's due to bad sales and marketing. So my opinion, sometimes it's just bad luck.
It has to be. I mean, with any business, right? And food and bev is notorious for its
Yeah.
challenges. But yeah, and you're working with suppliers, you're working with distributors, you're working with channels, which is very difficult. I mean, if you're someone who doesn't have maybe even advanced business knowledge, working channels the learning curve can be very high. I want to get back to the people though, because you've really met a lot of folks in the space. Uh, help me understand what keeps you coming back. What are these brewers like? What is it that if you were to tell people about this kind of business, what should you expect from the people who operate it?
Well, they're serious about their businesses, the ones who are successful, like I said, but they're fun people. I enjoy it when I go out and do an interview. And I happen to be in Tokyo this summer, and I went out and visited a gentleman I had read about who had some training here in the U.S., but had won World Beer Cup medals in Japan, and they are doing a great job out there. They are winning for a country you wouldn't associate with beers necessarily. They are winning a pretty good share of medals. So I went out and saw him and interviewed him and had beers with him. And there was a language barrier. A lot of Japanese don't speak really good English. It's they focus on their language there. But we had a great time together. We laughed. We did manage to communicate. I speak a little bit of Japanese, and he speaks better English. Better English. Yeah. Biru wa doko desu ka? Where's the beer? But we had a wonderful time, and he actually had another brewery coming in from a different area of Japan who had also won a medal. It just so happened on the day that I was with him. And so we ran around together and tasted beers, and he's serious about what he's doing, but he's also fun. He's accessible, and again, that's what I like about this. I like it that not all of them are out to kill each other. They are working together and collaborating. They share information. They work on recipes together. Not always, but a lot of times in what I've seen out there, they are communicating, and they're like old friends. You go to a beer festival, and there's big hugs and laughing, and then they'll get into serious matters. I mean, maybe what types of hops they're using. I know you're interested in hops, and things like that. Where they're buying their malt or their hops, or other things. So they're just people. But I find them to be good people and very approachable. And I've made some friends. I've made a lot of friends doing this. So that to me is very important. I'm very thankful for that in this Thanksgiving week. I got to remember to give my thanks for all the friends I've made in the beer industry.
Well, and since you've made so many friends, you've gathered a lot of knowledge, and I want to dive into this topic, which is hops, because I don't know anything about hops, and from what I understand, it's like in Hawaii, which is the first chapter of your book, by the way. You should go read this chapter. You're meeting with this owner who has to purchase all of his ingredients from the mainland, so it's got to ship all the way to Hawaii. And he was talking about the different markets for hops. And you talked about malts before. What do hops mean for beer? The four ingredients, is hops and malt the same thing? Like, give me a breakdown of what it is that we're actually tasting or looking at, and then dive in a little bit to what brewers have to deal with.
Yeah, hops are a big deal. They were used early on in history as a preserving agent, so it preserved the beer. You have two different classifications for hops. Actually three. One is bittering. So they really are focused on bittering the beer. That could be like a Magnum hop, could be a Summit, that are strictly for bittering. And then you have aroma hops. And one of those might be Chinook, Willamette. I'm using some Oregon hops. Fuggles, which is an English hop.
What did you just call me? I mean, a fuggle. I'm using that.
Yeah,
for
I better
sure.
pronounce that. Fuggle. Fuggles. Yeah, there's all kinds of funny names. I think I think by now there are well over 250 hop varieties. I had heard 400 at one point. A lot of them, they're being grown in the Great Lakes region now, but we have the majority of the market is in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho.
Interesting.
For production. Production's down a little bit. They overproduced one year. I think it was 2021. And and they didn't sell all of them, and actually they stocked some and still probably selling some from that overproduction. You had some of the craft breweries going out of business, and consumption changing a little bit with people going to spirits and cocktails and some other things. So your consumption changed. And I think the bigger portion of the beer market that took a hit was the mega breweries, okay, Coors and Budweiser. I think craft beer weathered the storm pretty well. Yeah, it did have some breweries go out of business, and uh, it didn't lose market share. It actually gained it because big beer lost a lot more. So I think in 2023, there was a 13% increase in market share by craft beer. But back to hops. Yeah, it affects everything. Hops are very important. They're one of the four components in beer, at least as established by the Reinheitsgebot, which is the German beer law. Your four main ingredients are water. We talked about malt, hops, and yeast. And you being an IPA guy, hops is a big deal. So, and it's a big deal with a lot of people. I mean, you go to the beer shelves and stuff, and you see a lot of IPAs. I do like those. I also like hazies, which are part of the IPA family, and I like lagers. I like pretty much across the spectrum. Maybe barley wine is one that I have to really be in the right mood to drink. Super high alcohol content, and to me, sometimes like drinking my great aunt's a liquid form of my great aunt's fruitcake, which I always used to try to hide when mom would share that with me during the holidays. But hops play a big role in all of this. They add so much flavor. They add to the longevity of the beer, and they're growing in different flavors. So as I mentioned, you have aroma and bittering, and then you have hops that have both, that have bittering and some flavoring and aroma components in them, dual type hops. So the brewers, sometimes there have been shortages in the past, and I've talked with brewers, and they've had a hard time getting what they want. So there have been those kinds of situations. Then, like I mentioned, there's oversupply. You mentioned Maui Brewing. What's interesting about that is, yeah, they have to import most of their stuff, but they did use some of the local ingredients.
What is off the record? You don't have to name. You like keep their identity anonymous. Like it stuck with you. You couldn't put it in the book, but you just need to remember that.
Oh, I did hear things like that. And I allowed each of my interviews, and this isn't typical journalism style, but I pride myself in factual accuracy. And so I went back to each of the brewers, and I did have a few in their quotes asked to take something out, but I'm not at liberty to report what that was, because we had an agreement. And I think it made people more comfortable in the interviews when I said and open it up, say that I would let them look at it before it went to print. I think it was helpful. Not only did they fix some factual errors, but they did engineer a few of their quotes. Like I mentioned, a lot of them did have an engineering background, so they did some engineering of quotes. But one of the things I wanted to say, it's in the book. I think it's in the book, but about you mentioned the supply of things into Hawaii. And their coconut porters, which are so good. And if any of you can grab a hold of a coconut Iwa porter or the imperial version of that, which is outstanding. It is so good. And I think you can get it in a bomber bottle, which is, a larger size, almost a wine size bottle of beer. He had to buy his coconuts from Guam. He outstripped production in Hawaii of coconuts for the so he had to import his coconuts from Guam. So I found that to be really interesting. And Anybody, who likes coconut flavor and chocolate, and they're subtle flavors. It's not like over the top, like you're drinking a hot chocolate with a load of coconut poured into it. Nothing like that. It's more subtle.
So I have a
But
question
that
for
was
you.
one of the, yes.
Sours versus beer, because that's how I think of it. To me, a sour is not beer. I don't think it's beer. I think it's wine juice. It's just how it's the flavors. It doesn't taste. It's like a bubbly, juice style concoction. Okay, so sours. Just get your quick opinion. We have a few minutes left. What is your quick opinion on sours themselves?
Oh, how are we only at a few minutes left? I can't believe it. Maybe I talked too much. I love sours. Okay. And it was a little bit of a bridge to cross once upon a time. But the history of sours goes back to Belgium, to the lambic beers and the beers in Flanders. You look at old paintings of the villages and people carrying around pots and laughing and whatnot. I envision those as they were drinking sours. They would ferment them, come up with sour flavors. So first of all, it's a very old style beer. And not everybody's crazy about them, but I wonder if I told you to close your eyes and I handed you a sour and I didn't tell you what it was.
I brought
and
one.
and you didn't know it was wine, although it would have carbonation in it. So that would probably be a giveaway. But I am crazy about them, especially in the summer. I like a nice sour. There's Gosas out there that have a little bit of salt pinch. There's Oud Brewing, which means old brown. And it is brown in color and has wonderful flavors in it. And like I said, people were running around in the 1300s trying to survive because the potable water wasn't good. So a lot of times they would drink beer. Charles Bamforth, the professor at UC Davis, famous beer trainer and guy, and a friend of Ken Grossman.
There you go. Ken Grossman. We got it.
Ken Grossman of Sierra Nevada. Hope you stayed tuned. But it's a wonderful beer to me. I love sour beers in the summer. I like lagers. I drink seasonally. So for me right now, the Speedway Stout that you got me drinking in the morning and dark beers, perfect. It's a little darker outside. It's foggy here this morning. When it's dark and rainy and there's thunderstorms, give me a 4 to 5% or 6%, maybe 6% for a stout, but lower for porters. Give me one of those. Now, I don't need to drink 10 of them. I'll have one or two. It's a nice night. I'm not going to get thrashed drinking it. There are bigger stouts and things. If you do want to get thrashed, there are imperial stouts, like I mentioned.
I like this term, thrashed. I like that. Yeah. I'm gonna steal that one.
Yeah, maybe I'll get thrashed on Thanksgiving. I don't know. We'll see.
It's only 8 a.m., Kirk. You've got all day. Look, you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
We'll see what the political discussions come up at the dinner table with all the guests.
Okay, last question before we end is that the perception of craft beer, right? So you have people who absolutely love it. I think people more in your camp who are just nerds about beer. There's people like me who like craft brews but aren't, pretty, neutral on the whole concept. And there are people who hate it because they imagine a guy with a big beard and a curly mustache who's trying to explain beer to somebody who doesn't care at the bar and very snobby about their beer and poo-pooing like, well, I just want to drink a Miller Lite. What's wrong with that? And how dare you? It's a disgrace to beer as a whole. So there's like those three groups on a spectrum, and I wonder what people who haven't been to craft brewery have that conception of it, that it's just somebody who's just going to mansplain beer to them. What are they missing? What's misunderstood about the experience or the industry that you'd want to clarify for those folks?
For me, I think it's super approachable. And if you look at craft beer, technically they were doing craft beer in Egypt. They actually paid the people who built the pyramids, and they were probably slaves, but they paid them in beer. Craft beer has been going on for a long time. I just mentioned sours and the open tank fermentation, leaving it open and letting the wild yeast get in there. But I think it's yeah, you're going to get those characters in anything. You're going to definitely get them at the wineries. You're going to get them. I know a beer snob or I'm sorry, a whiskey snob. Do you know one?
Yeah, he's named Jeb.
Jeb Senior. And I like whiskey too, by the way. I'm with Jeb. I like whiskey. Hope someday we can have one together. But they're everywhere. In reality, these people who say, craft beer is sliding downhill or whatever, I think it's silly, because I think people like what they like, and they're going to go out. They're going to go out with their families and friends and have a beer together. It's not something after millennia that is going to go away. People love it, and they love getting together. And you are going to run into some guy with, the stereotype, full bearded, who's a beer know-it-all. Maybe some guy like me. I don't know. I can also shut up. I've learned to shut up. Hard to believe, but we are salespeople. So we're not all extroverts. Some of us are introverts, as was mentioned at Outbound, but we know how to talk with people. And we have social intelligence and emotional intelligence. We're good at this. They're on either end. You're going to have people who are ultra extroverts. You're going to have the full scale, and you're going to have some who are ultra introverts who maybe don't feel comfortable doing this. So go to a brewery, order a beer, and go sit and enjoy the atmosphere. Maybe you're outside by yourself having a beer and just enjoy it to yourself if you're a super introvert. But you will have, I guarantee you, just a full selection of people wherever you happen to land on a particular night or afternoon or maybe morning. Different people, and I've met a lot of good people out there through this whole journey, and they're a lot of them are in the books or in the book. I am working on a second one, but I met people along the way who I wasn't expecting to meet, who weren't the brewmasters, and I just happened to sit down next to at a bar, or I was on an airplane with them, and I wove some of them into the story. So I love people. I guess I couldn't do well in sales if I didn't. So that's very helpful, and I think it'll be helpful for your audience and all of my comrades out there in sales who are at Outbound and Sales Gravy U.
I love it. And thank you so much for being here. You've got this wonderful book. It's a great thing to grab for the holidays. I know that you are looking to move some of these books. Well, your wife is looking to move some of these books. And where can we get Craft Beer Country? Where can we get this?
My preference for you guys would be to get it at craftbeercountry.com. and order it there, because then you have the option. I can sign it for you if you like. I also want to say, if any of you end up going to Outbound next year, I'm going to try to lasso Jeb here and go out and drink some beer and taste together. I'd be happy to sign a book there as well, or talk about beer. I promise you, I won't be that guy that Jeb was talking about and a know-it-all. I'll answer some questions. We'll laugh and drink some beer together. But if you go to craftbeercountry.com, you can buy it there. You can also buy it at Amazon. I'm not sure anymore. I did 30 book signings at Barnes and Nobles in the West, and I'm not sure how many are carrying it anymore. So my recommendation is go through craftbeercountry.com or to Amazon.
Perfect. And craftbeercountry.com. That's
yes, sir.
craftbeercountry.com. Go check out this book. And thank you to Savannah River Brewing Company. They don't actually sponsor this podcast, but Living in Augusta really like their lines. We got No Jacket Required, which is a play on the Augusta National and the Masters Tournament. We've also got Finnezy Swamp Thing, which is our sour. So thank you to Savannah River Brewing Company for the tasting this morning. And look at Kirk. He's got his Thanksgiving hat on. We want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, happy Thanksgiving season, happy beer drinking season. And if you're looking to check out anything for your sales journey, your learning journey as a team, as a leader, go check out Sales Gravy University. That's learn.salesgravy.com. learn.salesgravy.com. Kirk, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.